Are you considering a hair transplant procedure and you're afraid of the strip method, thinking it's antiquated? Not so fast. Stay tuned, we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. Hi, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're doing great today. So today's topic is about FUT, or strip surgery, hair transplantation. As if you've been looking into hair transplant options, either for you or a family member, in doing your online search, or if you've been to a couple of consultations, you've probably heard the term FUT, strip procedure, and FUE, follicular unit excision. Those are the two techniques that are available now for harvesting of donor hair. That's the hair from the sides and the back of the head, the permanent hair supply for hair transplantation surgery. So FUE, the method that you go with the punch and there's no stitches, it's gaining a lot of popularity, and a lot of times it's portrayed like the only solution and the best solution for the hair transplant procedure. I don't agree with that. I have a personal opinion that's based on science, based on studies. Not everybody agrees with me, even people with a lot of experience, and I respect that. But my practice, it's about 50% strip, 50% FUE. The reason why, I'll show you here. The strip surgery is still a great technique. So let's talk a little bit about that. I'm going to show you a few things and hopefully demystify the issue a little bit for you, because a lot of information that's out there, it's not correct. Okay. First of all, let's review quickly the concept of the follicular unit, because this is the base of a hair transplant procedure, whether it's done by FUT, follicular unit transplantation or strip surgery, or FUE, follicular unit excision. So you see the term follicular unit there on both of the terminologies. So a follicular unit is a group of hair that grows, or a bundle of hairs that grow together from the same structure from the donor zone. There's a video about what is a hair graft. I'm going to link it here so you can review that. I discussed in a lot of detail what that means. But basically, if you look at this picture, it's basically a zoomed out area of this patient's donor area. You can see here, for example, you have like a 2-hair follicle there, a 3-hair follicle bundle, another 2-hair follicle there. So those are follicular units. When we transplant them, whether by strip or FUE, we will isolate these bundles and they will be transplanted as one follicular unit. So one follicular unit, or one graft, one hair graft or one hair implant, can contain 1 hair, 2 hairs, 3, 4 or more, depending on how they come from the back. So just so you understand that, a quick little review. Basically the difference between the FUT method and the FUE method is in the execution, right? Obviously. FUT, we take a little strip of skin and hair, small, from the donor scalp, usually from the back here. And then from that, the strip is taken under microscopes and it's dissected into the follicular units. And then the follicular units are implanted into the balding areas or thinning areas. The follicular unit excision, or the FUE, you go with a small little punch diameter and then you harvest the follicular units individually. No need for stitches, no need for a linear incision. So the follicular units theoretically come out of the scalp already ready to be implanted, though here in the office we take them under a microscope for quality control, but we try not to do much with them. They already come sort of ready to be implanted, so you don't have to dissect or to cut them from the strip. So a lot of the fear that I get from most patients about the strip is, number one, it's going to be aggressive, it's going to be painful, it's going to leave a huge scar that I will never be able to cover. Not true. This is an example of a patient here. This was just after it was done, so hopefully not too graphic. You can see barely a red line coming across here. This is where the strip was removed. So there used to be about a finger breadth or maybe a finger width of scalp here that has been removed, and then the lower edge of that incision and the top edge have been brought together, and you see the stitches here. The suturing technique that we use is sort of like a baseball stitch. It's called a running suture. Basically there's knots on the ends and then just little loops bringing the tissue together. You can see almost here, almost immediately the line has almost disappeared. The stitches that we use now are dissolvable, so you don't have to even come to remove them anymore. They'll dissolve by themselves. This hair here is the upper hair, so this is the top of the patient's scalp. This is the neck down here. So this hair has been lifted, and once the strip has been removed, now this hair will be released and it'll curtain over and it'll cover the incision right away. So there's no visibility with the strip procedure right away, as far as the donor hair goes. So like I said before, from the strip we take the tissue, we take it into microscopes. These are highly specialized microscopes. The tissue is maintained in cold temperature in a special holding solution so that the follicles stay alive. And the staff that we have here, my team has been working with me for 20 years, so we're very experienced, and that's a very delicate process. You want to be careful so you don't damage them, but this is what you end up getting. You end up getting from the strip. So took a little bit of a piece of the strip here. You can sort of see the follicles lined up like a picket fence, bulbs here, the top of the skin is right here. So you can see the follicular unit, and then what we're doing is we're actually going in between them and breaking them down into smaller pieces until we end up with follicular units to be implanted. So these are the follicular units here. You can see a 3-hair follicular unit on this one, a 2-hair there, and so forth. So once we have them all separated, then we will implant them into the incisions. That's the basic difference. With the FUE, you would not have any of these steps. You would be harvesting these already from the scalp. Another question that I have is, well, the scars from FUTs or strips are very big and wide. That's because you see ads on your in-flight magazine comparing a patient with an FUE and a patient with an FUT with a big old scar across the back of the head. Yes, there's a scar, of course, but it's not nearly as bad as people make it look. Got to take into account too that people that want to sell the FUE, if that's the only thing they perform, they're going to make the FUT look bad. So I don't have a preference because I do both, so I can tell you what's the best for your situation. So this is a video I recorded of a patient of mine. Now this guy has had 2 strips already, 2 procedures, and when we do multiple strips, we always go into the same incision the second time, so there's no 2 scars. Try to find where the donor scar is here. So as you see, I'm running my fingers through his hair, and it's very hard to see where the scar is. I'll show you on this time here. There you go, right there, a little bit, a very faint white line that showed on the scalp. So not a big deal. Most patients heal like that. Not everybody does, but the scars usually tend to be very, very thin. Pencil line scars, actually. So what are some of the results with FUT? So the thing with the FUT that I like is, well, a few of them, but the most important one is that if you get someone that has considerable hair loss, say for example this friend of mine here, Steve, he had considerable hair loss, had great donor, very nice and full hair on the sides and back, but he needed a lot of transplants, a lot of hair moved. The strip method preserves donor hair, and you can't convince me otherwise because the mathematics just don't add up for people that want to prove to me that you can have the same amount of hair moved with FUEs versus strips. The thing is, when you take FUE grafts or FUE hairs, imagine if you have a piece of sod, right, with grass, and you start picking out the blades of the grass, while you're leaving empty spaces behind. Those spaces don't get filled back in the hair follicle, so you're going to leave some scar tissue, some empty spots, and the more you take, the more empty spots you leave. If you do enough of that harvesting, you end up having holes, right? And that's what happens with the donor. With the strip surgery, you would take the strip, but you will bring the scalp back together, so everything else, all the other areas of the scalp will be left intact. So in a patient that will need a large number of grafts moved in their surgeries or multiple surgeries to get their goal, to me, in my opinion, the strips are much better for that. I've had strips. I've had 4 strip surgeries so far myself, have not had an FUE. I had a great experience with them, and I still have a lot of donor hair left. Had I had FUEs, probably my donor would be a lot weaker. So these are the kind of results you get. Now, important to say too that results are the same with FUE or FUT nowadays. If it's done correctly, you won't see a difference there. So the only issue really is how you harvest the grafts. Another example, younger patient had significant loss here, needed a large number of transplants, probably will need more. This is only after one surgery. I haven't seen him in a few years, but likely because of his age, he's going to need another one eventually to thicken up. And because of that, you know, we don't have a magic crystal ball to predict the future, so it's always best to play on the safe side. And to me, strips are much better for you to plan future surgeries. For women, in my opinion, FUTs are the best technique, because FUE for a woman, you have to shave the hair. Even if you do the no-shave FUE, which is a modality that we offer to our patients, it's not offered everywhere, but we do. Even if you do the no-shave, there's really no reason to do it. Women are rarely going to shave their head or cut it so short that you'll see a scar. Of course, you know, God forbid they have cancer in the future and they have to shave their head or they lose their hair. It's usually a temporary thing, and even if that happens, there are things you can do to camouflage the scar. Scalp micropigmentation, putting grafts into the scar, all sorts of techniques you can do to take care of that. Another lady that had 2 strip procedures, again, you can get results that are really, really nice. So there's no difference in FUE versus FUT. This patient here had a brain tumor, was radiated with radiation therapy and burned a large portion of his hair on the top. He had 2 things. He had scars from the surgeries. You can't see because they're under the hair, but there are scars from the brain tumor removal that went all over the scalp. So it wasn't good for FUE because the scars would really limit the amount of grafts that I could take. So we opted for a strip. We took it from this side here away from the operated side, so did great and moved a lot of hair. So talking about treatment of the scar, what can you do, right? So that's one thing too that people don't understand about the FUT. Yes, it creates a scar. FUEs also create scars. Problem is, the difference is the FUE creates dots versus lines, so you don't see a dot as easy as you see a line. So FUE patients are able to cut their hair shorter, there's no question about that. But if you have a complication from an FUE procedure, if there's thinned areas in the donor, if you take too much from any given area, it's very hard to treat. It's almost impossible. There's really nothing you can do about it, or very little. You can only do scalp micropigmentation at that point, but the hair is gone. For strips, even if you end up with a huge scar, with a complication that we're going to talk about in another video about complications, I'll show you some of the worst things that can happen with a strip. You can still do things with it. You can revise the scar, you can remove the scar like I did for this patient here. You know, not a bad scar, but because of the length of his hair, you can kind of see here the scar is probably about twice as wide as I would like it to be also. So didn't heal as well as we hoped. And you know, the healing has to do a lot with the tissue, with the skin and all that. But anyway, so he wasn't happy with this. What we did is I brought him back, and all I did here is I took out the scar, removed it, and then put some fresh sutures on there. Did the 3-layer closure, so put some stitches deep below, then some in the middle, some in the skin to hold it together, and that's the result there. So much easier to cover. The scar is still there, but it's about a quarter of the size there. Other options would be to put hair actually into the scar if you want to. So we can harvest a few hairs with an FUE and just kind of pluck it into the scar. What you're doing is you're just breaking up the line so it doesn't so the eye doesn't see it. That can be done as well. And you can do scalp micropigmentation, basically tattoo to sort of blend in the scar. And a lot of times I find myself doing a combination of these three options, depending on the situation of the patient. So bottom line is there's a lot of things you can do for a poorly healed strip scar, and when there's not a lot that we can do for the complication of FUEs, as you'll see in the video about complications. So watch that video. It's going to be very informative. Some things that are hard to see, but you need to be educated on that. Okay, so FUTs are not a thing of the past at all. So there you go. That's FUT for you, strip surgery. Do it every day. I love doing it. That was my original training in hair transplant surgery over 22 years ago. I do FUE as well. I love it too. There are patients that I recommend one versus the other for whatever reason. We can discuss that in your consultation. Everybody's a little different. Some patients are a great candidate for either one, and at that point it's just a matter of preference. But I find myself a lot of times recommending the strip versus the FUE for the reasons that we would discuss depending on your situation. So keep an open mind. Don't discard the FUT right off the bat because of what you see out there. Okay, and be careful with clinics that only offer FUE, because if I only have a dark horse to sell you, I'm going to tell you that the white horse doesn't run as fast, right? So you get the analogy, hopefully. So just let us know. We can take a look at you when you're here, either here at the office or virtually on a free consultation. Doesn't cost you anything. Please like the channel, subscribe to it so we can keep posting these videos for you and sharing our experience with you. Leave your comments below if you have recommendations or suggestions for videos. If you have questions, we'll be happy to answer them for you. Just put the comments here, okay? I will see you next time. Take care.